Hi, Truth Seekers. It's Kathy Malloy. This is my personal story about bladder cancer. Forgive me if it sounds like I'm reading, because I am. Because unlike Mike, I'm not a talk show host, and I can't just speak extemporaneously for paragraphs and paragraphs without some sort of reference. That was not one of my gifts. But I can write a little narrative, which is what I've done. And with your permission, I will read it by way of explaining what's been going on in our lives since about the middle of July. Actually, the end of July. I believe my first doctor's appointment with the urologist was July 30th. So this is very, very recent information for all of us, and it's been a lot to digest, so to speak. So again, forgive the reading. And also forgive the backstory, but as I'm about to explain, there's a reason for the narrative. So this is my personal story about bladder cancer. It is a cautionary tale to all the middle-aged women out there who, like me, ignored their symptoms because their medical providers told them they were normal for perimenopause. So to understand my recent experience with cancer and the healthcare system, you first need to know the context. Forgive the following exposition. When my speedometer turned over another 0 in January of 2018, it was like someone flipped an invisible switch that immediately and simultaneously disrupted my physical and mental health. It all happened so fast. I didn't have time to lace up all the psychological battle armor to shield me from the multiple ground and airstrikes that was menopause. Menopause hit me so hard at 50, and with so many stereotypical symptoms and situations, it was surreal. Night sweats, hot flashes, moodiness, cravings, middle-age spread, graying hair, hearing loss. I turned 50 and literally every physical and psychological cliche was happening to my body at the same time. Or at least that was the reality in my head. Who knows? Maybe it was early onset Alzheimer's. I wasn't thinking clearly. I started to imagine it as an SNL skit about a woman who had super sudden onset menopause, where all the symptoms happened at once. The night sweats, the painful heavy periods, the hot flashes, and her body then changes instantly too. Her boobs fall, her ass spreads, her hair turns gray, she needs glasses and a hearing aid, and then her teeth fall out. I could see Kate McKinnon in this skit, or Adie Bryant, with all the other actors showing up as guests to her 50th birthday party, as her body fell apart piece by piece during the party. Eventually, instead of getting drunk, she just got Alzheimer's and ended up sleeping with her son-in-law. Maybe Michael Che walks in on him as he's bringing in her mail, and it's a mix of ads for nursing homes, reverse mortgages, Depends coupons, or something like that. That's the real trauma, the psyops. The media and ads that convince you you're old and dying. 2 days after my 50th birthday, they hit my mailbox. By my first missed period 6 weeks later, I was filling a weekly recycle bin with glossy AARP mail invitations, dental implant offers, bladder control herbal supplement freebies, long-term health care facility brochures, senior mountain community land offers, and pre-need funeral arrangements. As a result of some weird email marketer purchasing the wrong list, my inbox was pounded with ads for erectile dysfunction drugs. Make her beg for it! Keep her up all night! Denture cream coupons automatically appeared in my Kroger account with options to check similar items like Metamucil and Depends. I got a senior discount offer at my local Jiffy Lube. The physical symptoms began that summer, like the second curse of Moses against the Pharaoh. God opened up the skies, and the night sweats thundered down nocturnal torrents that left my nightgown so thoroughly drenched you could wring water from it. If I magically slept through one of these deluges, I would wake up with salt crust in the corners of my mouth and lines of salt crystals in all my sensitive creases. With my wet hair glued to my face, I looked and smelled like seaweed, like some sea monster barfed up out of the ocean. I usually woke up goose-fleshed shivering because I was soaking wet under a high ceiling fan. Somehow Mike slept through all of this, most of the time. I would stumble to the bathroom and pull off my nightgown in the dark, and it felt like skinning a fish. Even made a sound. I would towel off and put on another big t-shirt, spread out a beach towel over my wet spot, and try to go back to sleep. Is this how teenage boys feel when they have wet dreams, I'd wonder? Poor boys with so little control over their developing bodies, just like me now. Menopause is like having all the horrible aspects of puberty, only now you're old and exhausted. Acne, back acne, raging hormones, irregular periods, moodiness, cravings. I had my annual visit with my OB/GYN in March, and we discussed my early menopause, which a blood test confirmed. I've only been seeing her a few years. This is my third physical, I think. I like her. She's about 5 years older than I am, African American. She is so confident. She's not cocky, but just so self-assured. I just trusted her immediately. She's friendly, but she's no nonsense. She explained that my estrogen wasn't low enough to warrant supplementation, so she suggested I try diet and exercise. She's a holistic kind of gal, and also suggested I eliminate as much inflammatory food as possible, like red meat. Well, Molly had already gone vegetarian about a couple years ago, as we all know, and that seemed like a good idea anyway, and I had packed on 20 pounds in the last couple of years in premenopausal weight, just like pre-adolescent weight gain. It happens twice. Isn't this fun? So I rejoined the gym for the 20th time, but this time I actually went. I decided it was bad enough being 50. Being fat and 50 was just too depressing. The doctor had ordered the annual mammogram, and I made an appointment for the following week at the big corporate hospital in North Atlanta, the #1 baby factory in the USA, Northside Hospital. More births than anywhere else, and most of them live. Anyway, I went for the mammogram in April and grinned and bore it while the tech flattened my boobs out between the two ice-cold metal plates and contorted me into a position. If you've never had the pleasure of having a mammogram, it's like trying to do a Pilates move while your boob is in an ice-cold vise. They want you to hold one arm straight up in the air and the other arm curved around the machine, grasping a handle, bending slightly at the waist toward the equipment, and tilt your head back just a little bit. Then hold your breath for 20 seconds while the tech scurries behind the leaded glass window. Now, this equipment looks like a machine from the 1950s. This technology has not improved in 60 years, and I will tell you, if men had to have mammograms, this medieval practice would be over. There would be no cold metal plates if there were testiculograms. Am I right? All right, I digress. After a couple of days on Thursday, I get a letter in the mail with my lab results. Normal pap smear, normal blood work, low estrogen as we expected, yada yada. Then there's a separate letter. This one's asking me to call and schedule a second mammogram, a repeat mammogram. It seems the radiologist saw a suspicious area and wanted a more specific, high-frequency radio test. I don't know why I wasn't freaked out, but I wasn't. I was calm. I called and scheduled the appointment, for the next Tuesday. It was the first available. I waited for Mike and Molly to come home and tell them the news, and I thought, why am I not upset? Am I in denial? I just don't feel any particular worry about this. And I have a lot of personal experience with breast cancer. My best friend's mother died from it, my godmother died from it, and 3 other close personal friends are in remission. And maybe that's why I wasn't afraid. It's just very familiar, and I just didn't feel like I had it. Well, Mike and Molly had a different reaction. Molly's eyes spilled over with tears and asked me if I felt sick, like Grandma had felt sick. Of course I didn't. I felt perfectly fine. Mike stared at the floor for a long time and then finally sighed and looked up and asked me if I wanted him to call his son Chris, the nurse, and talk about it. Not really. Chris is working in the cardiac cath lab, and that's really not much at all like mammography, so probably not. Later that night, I started to get that feeling I call a little crispy around the edges. I was anxious and twitchy and irritable. I didn't want to be touched. I didn't want to be talked to. Mike and Molly sensed this, probably by my subtle body language and my telling them to get the hell out of my face and shut the door. I scared myself to sleep with internet horror stories and the other side of the mountain type inspirational mini memoirs. This tension lasted about 72 more hours, and I was mostly able to put it out of my head and attend to the more pressing matters of my life, which is mainly my volunteer work for Molly, and less importantly, my real estate business and podcast production. 8 a.m. Tuesday, I'm back at the big corporate hospital in the mammography department, but this time they take me to the other side of the office. There's a separate entrance, I just learned, for us mammography repeat offenders. There's a separate waiting room and everything. A smaller waiting room. Quieter. More serious. I guess they don't want to parade a bunch of scared, stricken women through the waiting room with all the first-time and newbies. You know, we were a frightening lot. So this was a different tech who took care of me with a gentle touch and a practiced manner that said, I've seen 1,000 women in here like you. Just be strong. In fact, I think that's what she said. Stay strong, which actually wasn't completely inspiring, but I knew her heart was in the right place. She only needed 2 quick images, and I was out of there in 10 minutes, back in the dressing room and applying one of those little wet towelettes of deodorant to my underarms. I went home and waited for the call. Northside does invest in patient services, I will say that. If it sometimes feels like a mass production line because of its size, it runs like the finest German engineering. They know their patients are waiting on pins and needles, so their pathology department is like a small city. And they have radiologists in every subspecialty working around the clock. Same with oncologists and microbiologists. It's astonishing. They have the quickest lab results, I think, in the country. They're like the FedEx or Amazon of medical research here. My cell phone rang as my garage door opened. I actually thought for a minute the ringing had opened the door. Was I losing my mind? Was it tinnitus? It was Northside, and the pathology report was in, and it was negative. The second x-ray showed no mass. That suspicious area on the first x-ray was a bundle of improperly positioned tissue. So, operator error. The first technician just didn't squeeze me out flat enough, which I didn't know whether or not was an insult or a compliment. We all let out an exhausted sigh of relief and put that whole scary scenario behind us. Now that story, True Seekers, that I just related to you, that I assumed was going to be my cancer story. How the first radiology tech didn't flatten me out enough, I wasn't flat enough, ha ha ha. So we had this little scary false alarm weekend, brushed with the Grim Reaper and lived to tell the tale. That was going to be my big cancer story. And that was April of 2018. By that summer, my hormone freak show was in full bloom. I was flashing and freezing and manic and crying and spotting and flooding, and it took maximum effort on minimum caloric intake just to lose 8 pounds in 3 months. I felt like shit. My hair was brittle and turning gray. I looked gray. My hair broke between my fingers. I made another appointment with my doc and asked her if it was finally time for some supplements. She tested my thyroid and hormone levels, and again, they were in normal range. Low normal, but still normal. Well, I didn't feel normal. Why did I feel so sick and low energy? Some days, on the other hand, I had so much energy I was practically manic. I would paint all the wood baseboards or work in the yard pulling weeds and moving plants until my hands were blistered and my forehead peeling. Once I decided I didn't like the shape of the stone patio around the fire pit anymore, so I dug up all the stones by hand and moved them around for hours and hours, way after the streetlights came on. Mike had to pull me inside and made me strip in the garage and hose off before coming in. That's how muddy I was. I was pulling twigs and cobwebs out of my hair. Other days I could barely get out of bed. I would wake up thick, like my head was full of wax. My tongue felt like a club in my mouth. I had to gulp a tumbler of coffee that felt like molasses and swallow 3 ibuprofen just to feel human enough to drive Molly to school. Then I'd collapse back on the living room sofa, turn on the last hour of Morning Joe, and fall asleep composing angry tweets in my puddin' head. Mike would be out walking his mid-morning mile or swimming his late-morning 36 laps and would have to rouse me from this muddy-headed stupor when he came in the front door. I knew this wasn't normal. Was it an autoimmune disease? Some systemic yeast infection? Did I pick up a parasite that was eating my nervous system? The doctor listened to all this patiently and nodded and took notes and then looked at me for a minute and suggested I see a psychiatrist. Well, thanks, ma'am. I'm way ahead of you. I've been seeing a psychiatrist for years. You should see it there in my chart. Cymbalta, Wellbutrin. Do you see that? Those 2 drugs that keep me passing the open windows. I wasn't depressed. I just felt like my blood had turned to corn syrup sometimes. Or sometimes I felt so good it must be what I thought cocaine was like. Honestly, I've never tried it. That heart condition I used to have, scared the bejesus out of me. I was afraid to drink decaf. I couldn't take Novocaine. I had to have 3 fillings with no Novocaine. I avoided stimulants like they were arsenic. But I did make a new appointment with my psychiatrist because I knew there was something going on. And he's one of these old school Atlanta doctors, Emory, been around forever. He's about Mike's age. When I met him the next week, we discussed my near-psychotic symptoms, which I was convinced were related to menopause. I felt hormone crazy, as my grandmother used to say. And of course, he agreed and said that some erratic behavior and mood swings was just to be expected with the hormone fluctuations in this change of life. He added that his wife went nuts when she had the change and sold all their furniture. This little misogynistic outburst aside, we decided we should up both dosages a little bit, tweak it and titrate it and nudge it and boost my dopamine a little and see if the psychiatric and physical symptoms improved. He also suggested that even though my TSH was normal, I might benefit from some supplemental thyroid medicine and should discuss that the next time with my doc and might help me lose a little weight. So I left that day a little less dazed and confused, but still unable to pinpoint the source of these symptoms. The next morning I awoke with a symptom I could pinpoint, though, with gun-sight precision. I couldn't pee. Or rather, I could pee, but it felt like I was peeing a swarm of angry hornets, and they were all carrying tiny razor blades. When I did manage, painfully and with much wincing, to void my bladder, I knew something was wrong. It was dark and cloudy and foul-smelling, and it looked like the worst urinary tract infection in the world. I didn't have a fever or any bad abdominal pain, but when I had to go, it burned like fire and smelled like some hellish sulfuric bog water. So I went to the new emergent care center up the street and signed in, put on that paper towel, screamed out a few drops of urine into a cup, and waited for the physician's assistant. I like this place. It's new, and it smells like fresh paint, and there isn't a decade-old ring of grime around the baseboards. Are you noticing a theme? I have a thing for clean baseboards. I came here later in December when I will slice open my pinky to the tendon while cutting the cheese. The Parmesan cheese. That's a story for another weekend. So the young PA comes in and tells me, yup, it's a wicked UTI. They're going to send it off to culture to see exactly what particular nasty little bug has taken up residence in my bladder. Meanwhile, I get the macro bid and Hebiclens to wash with and some lidocaine ointment for topical analgesic until the antibiotic kicks in. And finally, those fun orange dye tablets that stain everything but do ease the symptoms, pyridium. After 24 hours on Macrobid, the symptoms are almost gone. I feel fine. I call my doctor's office and she calls back, yes, it's normal to have increased infections during the change, like UTIs and yeast infections. The pH is changing. The environment is different. It sounded like she was describing some exotic environment in a travel magazine. Everything is different here in the jungles of dwindling estrogen. It's hotter, more arid, and drier than the other jungles, but there are twice as many bugs and bacteria. The water is like acid and it rains every night, but you never get cool. She asked me about my mental state, and I said, truthfully, it was getting better, or I was adapting. Either the titrated meds or passage of time were easing my symptoms. 3 months later, it happened again. October 2018 was a very, very, very not great month, as President Asswipe would say. We had a basement flood of brown water from a sewage pipe behind Mike's broadcast studio. And Mike is a little like Jerry Seinfeld, if you didn't know. His first reaction was, we gotta move. Instead, we went to a hotel for a few days. So we had to have all the carpet ripped out, the drywall cut 6 feet off the floor. You probably remember this story. The remaining walls and cement floor had to be washed with industrial strength antibacterial spray and baked with hot fans for 5 days. And that's when Bob Kincaid subbed for us a lot that week. Well, in the middle of that disaster, both our cars broke down, the upstairs HVAC unit died, Rusty got sick, and so did I. He was impacted, constipated, poor little buddy, but I had another nasty urinary tract infection, but not nearly as nasty as before. Now, I don't like this at all. Same symptoms, peeing barbed wire dipped in battery acid, no fever, no swollen glands, no back pain, back to the antiseptic urgent care center, and a different physician's assistant says my last culture had grown out E. coli. Well, Macrobid wasn't always effective against that particular bug, so he suggested we go old school with a sulfa drug, Bactrim. Well, now, hell, I remember Bactrim. My grandmother lived on Bactrim. And when he asked about my family history, I remembered my grandmother had constant urinary tract infections. Not so much my mother. She was more prone to yeast infections. Okay, I'm not going to continue the family gynecological history here, although parts of it are interesting. Suffice it to say, there was a history of female urogenital disorders in my maternal lineage. Well, the Bactrim worked great, worked just as fast, and didn't kill every single healthy organism in my gut. Now, I love yogurt, but I have to eat about a gallon of it a day when I take antibiotics. And Bactrim doesn't do that. And you talk about dehydration. I mean, that was another mass symptom. The AP asked if I'd been working out lately, and I had, and at the gym and also in the yard in the nice fall weather. Well, there you go. I was dehydrated, probably why the urinary tract infection came back. You gotta flush your bladder. You gotta flush your kidneys. If the urine sits there and gets stale, it's gonna get infected. Drink more water, always more water. They should have flashing neon signs on the highways, drink more water. So I drank more water, and I got better again. But by the holidays, I started to feel sick in a different way, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I just felt ill. Mike started noticing it too. He said, "You look sick. You should go to the doctor." I thought, well, maybe I have like what Epstein-Barr, one of these chronic fatigue diseases. It was just a mystery. I couldn't figure any of it out. It all felt like it was related somehow, and I kept thinking the common thread was menopause. I went to the hospital sooner than I planned, but for a different reason. That's the story for another day about the sliced finger cutting the cheese. Well, that surgery around Christmas and physical therapy sucked all the oxygen out of any other medical issues I had at the time. I kept spotting and feeling like I had a low-grade infection, but hey, every medical provider said that's what you get with menopause. Suck it up. Face the truth. This is the new reality, the new normal. you're like going through adolescence again, only, kind of backwards and through hell. Well, by February, my finger therapy was tapering down, and I made an appointment for my annual physical with the OBGYN. And we exchanged the usual small talk about holidays and travel, and then cut to the chase. Was I still having periods? Occasionally. Did I spot during the month? All the time. Do I still have night sweats and hot flashes? Yes, but they had eased up with the passing of this horribly hot summer, global warming. So she ran the usual blood test, did a urinalysis, and sure enough, I had a low-grade UTI. Nothing tragic, but it was there, E. coli again. This time I had no symptoms, nothing. She wrote me an order for a mammogram, but didn't do a pap smear. Now that bothered me. And she said the protocol was only once every 3 years now on a pap. And I think this is crazy. A woman can examine her own breasts for lumps and oddities. You know your boobs, okay? Not so much your ovaries and your uterus. That you need some help there. And so I'm still struggling with that one. But as for my first false positive mammogram, I wasn't sure I was ready for a repeat performance. I'm just, once bitten, twice shy. But she said the UTIs were normal and expected, but if I had another one, I should definitely see a urologist. She handed me a list of names. I left with a prescription for Augmentin. As always, the antibiotic cleared it right up. By March 2019, I was fine. I was following a low-carb diet that gave me more energy and more reliable blood sugar, and started to lose a few pounds. The spotting was less frequent, and my periods were coming about every 2 months, and they weren't accompanied by those killer cramps and clotting, which I thought was just so unfair. I shouldn't have to go through that twice. Once when I started, once when I stopped. Molly's first year of high school was flying by. She was cast as Mona Lipschitz in the spring musical Chicago, and she was head over heels ecstatic. Never saw that kid as happy as when she got that part as a freshman. Anyway, it was a good time. It was a busy time. I had a couple of good real estate clients and some promising opportunities ahead. Every once in a while, the toilet paper was a faint pink, or I saw a spot of red in the bowl, but hey, I'm still spotting, so there you go. Doc says it comes with, like egg roll. Now, there's a moment in the summer in Atlanta I look forward to every year. It's usually in early June, and the humidity is still low, and gardenias are blooming, and the air smells like warm 7-Up, and the longest days of the year, always my favorite. And that was true this last summer, 2019. Mike had finally published the book. It was off to the printers. Soon we would be able to fulfill all those Kickstarter pre-orders, and we would set up a 2-person assembly line. Well, 3-person actually. Molly and actually one of her friends would help too. That was a good feeling. Summer rolled around. We planned that second Malloy Mountain getaway. It was a soggy, frantic, fun experience and a real treat to meet truth seekers new and old. Molly was busy with swim team, and I started feeling really crappy again. That super low energy, sluggish, mutton head, oil in my veins feeling was back. What I thought was some oddball menopausal symptom, I was just moving at half speed. And it was same for my thought processes. I couldn't remember shit. I couldn't remember names of people I just met. I couldn't remember where I put anything. I would wander from room to room in my house trying to remember why I'd gone into that room to begin with. I know the inspiration for all those Mad Woman in the Attic 1930s and 40s film noir. Those films with those dark anti-hero guys who love the innocent young governess, but they have this crazy wife locked up in the attic, right? And you'll see her up there in the film in these black and white shadowy images of the mad woman with her arms out in front of her like a zombie, walking back in front of a window, and then walking in front of another window, and then back into the first window. You know, she's probably just looking for her keys, menopause. I'm with you, sister. That's me. Room to room. Why am I here? Like my arms out like a divining rod. Is that my cell phone? And there is something else, and if you're not grossed out at this point and you're still listening, then you should be good for this too. So here goes. I did notice that I had a different smell, okay? Or rather, I had a smell. Up until this 50th birthday turned Stephen King novel, my urine was odorless. I'd had 1 or 2 UTIs in my 20s and 30s, but that was it. So I know what normal smells like for me, Women, especially guys, you're probably like, oh, I knew it. Never mind. Yeah. Women, you know what I'm talking about. You know what normal is. Well, I made an appointment right away with one of those urologists on the list that the OBGYN gave me, and I waited. It was a 2-week appointment. When the date finally rolled around, it fell on the exact same day that I had a real estate closing I could not miss because I was acting as a power of attorney, so I called to reschedule. No problem, but it might be another 2 weeks. Okay, well, I made the appointment, but I also decided to call another name to see if I could get seen somewhere sooner. I had a gut feeling that this just wasn't good. So the next group I found could see me 2 days later. Awesome. And they were part of the same big corporate hospital group as my other providers, so all the sharing of medical records would be easy. I made an appointment with a urologist who had just moved here from New Jersey, where his reputation as one of the youngest, most respected urologists had earned him awards and placed him on all the top 10 doc lists. So I drove myself to that appointment Tuesday, July 30th, and I walked into this modern office building, and it looked more like a real estate firm than a doctor's office. They have comfortable sofas and seating groups with soft lighting and a mini fridge with sodas and waters, and the TV's on Discovery Channel documentaries, and there's a lighted magazine rack with a fresh selection of interesting titles, and there's some snacks, and, it was like a Starbucks, but instead of getting a cup of coffee, you pee in the cup, which I did. I stayed dressed up in my clothing for my initial meeting. I like that. A big pet peeve of mine is when a doctor you have never met one time in your life expects you to greet them for the first time ever wearing a paper towel. Seriously, how demeaning is that? Talk about a power imbalance. And you can't stand up when they walk in the room because, hello, paper towel. So they have to come over and walk over to you and get really close and lean over to shake your hand. And it's very uncomfortable to have this strange man you've never met before standing over your naked body. And I'm naked and he's not. And again, just doesn't seem fair. Just once I'd like a doctor to show up at my real estate firm and I hand him a napkin or a plastic sheet and say, okay, go strip and meet me in the next room and we'll study the MLS together. Come on, I'll show you some trends, some growing trends. Would you like that? Problem is, I think a couple of my former providers would probably be into it. See, menopause brain. Woo, train's running off the track. Sorry, here we go. So the urologist walk in and he is cute as a button. He's probably 40. He's bald, but he is so adorable. He has a little baby face. He has polka dot socks on. I like that too. We both stand up. We're both fully dressed. He introduces himself and his intern, who's very tall and who's shadowing him kind of like Lurch from the Addams Family. And he asked me how long I've been seeing blood in my urine. Pardon? Full stop. What? Say what? See what in my what? I've never seen blood in my urine. Well, he says, your paperwork here that your previous doctor said that you had blood in your urine. I said, well, yeah, microscopic blood, like with urinary tract infections. Isn't that what you always see with urinary tract infections? And he looked up and he said, well, sure you do. You do. You're absolutely right. And you have blood in your urine right now, actually. I know your blood doesn't have to be red or pink. And then I did remember that pink toilet paper. Maybe that wasn't period blood. I felt my heart sink into my stomach. I think he saw that reaction and said, listen, I want to get an ultrasound right now. Could you? I've got time. They've got time. I want you to empty your bladder and get an ultrasound because I want to see if you're emptying your bladder fully. After all, when you get older and that change happens, muscles get lax, sometimes urine is retained, it gets stale, sounds ripe for infection. Of course, yes, makes sense. Let's go. Off to the ultrasound down the hall. Now, I haven't had an ultrasound since I was pregnant. I used to love my ultrasounds. Excuse me, those of you who know me and know us well know we have a 15-year-old daughter, Molly, that is the love of our life and the light of our life and is treasured beyond measure by both of us. And truly is one of just the angels of the world, I'm convinced, if there are any. She was a long time coming. I had 4 miscarriages. We went through some really difficult, awkward, funny, and terrible and wonderful fertility treatments that finally resulted in Molly. And I loved my ultrasounds because every time I heard that waka, 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 waka of her heartbeat, watching it on the monitor and hearing it, knowing she was just chugging along full speed ahead. My little engine, never a quitter. I think I can, I know I can, I know I can. Waka, 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 waka. The sound was different. The ultrasound was different. It's still a cold room with warm sheets, which is really one of the greatest things ever. And the warm gel, but there was no prenatal heartbeat. There was no sound at all. But the technician was chatty in a bland way about local restaurants and the Atlanta Braves and her boyfriend who just moved in with his turtle and it's so smelly and she doesn't know what to do, that kind of thing. And she's rolling me from side to side as she's prattling on and she's imaging my kidneys and I'm thinking, okay, my kidneys now, okay, that's a little disquieting. And then all of a sudden I hear something. Whoosh, whoosh. It's not waka waka waka, it's whoosh. And I realize, oh, that's my blood flow. Okay, got it. She turned on the Doppler. Some of this is coming back to me from my nursing school 20 years ago. 20 minutes later, I'm dressed again and in his office, not the exam room. He walks in and sits down, flips on a whiteboard behind his desk, and puts up an image of my ultrasound. He looks at me straight in the eye and says this. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. That's not my style. You have a 3-centimeter mass in your bladder, and it has me worried. I want to schedule a CAT scan and then a biopsy. Meanwhile, as he's telling me this, he's turned around behind him and is writing almost backward as he's still facing me, all of this on the whiteboard so I can see it. I mean, this guy's like a Da Vinci or something. I mean, so he's writing this backwards behind him as he's talking to me forwards. Do you have anything you need to do in the next 2 weeks you could reschedule? And I knew it. I knew it the minute I sat in that ultrasound chair. I just knew it. I knew when she turned on the Doppler, I knew she was listening to see if there was, and looking to see if there was blood flow to a tumor. And unlike that false positive mammogram, I knew this wasn't going to be a false positive. I knew this was cancer. Maybe not, he said. Hey, it could be a pus pocket. It could be a cyst or a stone from a previous infection like the OBGYN said. The good news is it looks like the tumor is really close to your right ureter, really close to your right kidney. And I looked at him. I said, if that's the good news, what the hell's the bad news? He said, no, it's good news because your right kidney looks great. If this was a really aggressive tumor, you would expect your kidney would have been infected by now, affected by now. But both kidneys look great. Your kidney function is great. Your blood work is normal. That's all positive. And if it is cancer, there's a 70% chance it's treatable, easily treatable, with great outcomes. What do I do if it's the 30% type? I asked. He looked at me again straight in the eye. We fix it, he answered. I'm good. You'll have to trust me. You're in the right place. And honestly, I really did feel that instinctively. I trusted him. And here's the weird thing. Bladder cancer is the fifth most common cancer in America, but it's almost never discussed. Personally, Mike and I know 3 different men with bladder cancer. 2 in their 60s, 1 in his 50s. I don't know a single woman with bladder cancer. I can't remember ever hearing about a woman with bladder cancer, ever. And here is, and here it is, where I'm going to go full PSA on you, okay, right now, full public service announcement. When a woman receives a bladder cancer diagnosis, the prognosis is always worse, much worse than it is for a man, because women will ignore the symptoms, or their providers will misdiagnose them, especially if they're around menopause, right? A man at any age who sees red pee is going to run to the doctor. Of course they should, and they do. Their cancer is caught early. A 70-year-old woman who's post-menopause sees pink toilet paper, she's probably going to run to the doctor. That's not normal. She knows that. But a 50-year-old woman sees pink on the toilet paper, and she's spotting, and she's going through menopause and hot flashes and she's not going to run to the doctor. Of course not. And even if she does, like me, they're going to say, hey, comes with, like egg roll. Get used to it. Lots of unpleasantries going to happen now. Not one said cancer. So here I am, and I'll be damned. I didn't ignore my symptoms. 3 times I was told it was normal. No one suggested. Even my OBGYN thought it might be a stone or a low-grade bug. No one gave me a reason to worry at all, but I had one now. Well, it's all urine under the bridge now, but as the doctor would soon explain, this tumor of mine probably dated back over a year, with that first urinary tract infection that was so god-awful in the spring of 2018. 18 months ago. 18 months to grow and plant and fertilize with little E. coli, little cancer seedlings all over my bladder, probably my uterus too, my ovaries, like fluffy little baby cancer cells floating all through my lymph nodes like little fairies, sprinkling metastatic pixie dust all over my internal organs, my lungs, my liver, pancreas, spine, brain, sparkling with altered DNA. Or so I imagined on my zombie walk back to the car to figure out what to tell Mike. Before I left the office, I made an appointment for the CAT scan. I would have it 2 days from now, Thursday, August 1st. Mike was calm when I told him they found a mass, and rational. But later he told me he started sobbing as soon as we hung up. Well, his son Chris told me, and so did Molly. We told her together after school, but she said she knew there was something bad when Dad picked her up. He was crying. He was still teary. He was puffy. And we drove into the subdivision almost the exact same time. There is so much synchronicity to this story, it's spooky. It reminds me of those paranormal crime dramas my mother used to love. Maybe cancer diagnoses make you search for patterns and cloud atlases and meaning because all that mortality that slammed you up against the wall. Maybe deja vu is just a natural side effect of a possible terminal diagnosis. So I spent the next 48 hours poring over every internet article I could find at the highest academic level I could comprehend about bladder cancer. I became a bladder cancer expert overnight. I won't bore you with it here, but I was most fascinated by the statistics that affected me, menopausal women like me. That was the story I wanted to hear. So here you go. In 2016, about 18,000 women will be told they have bladder cancer. This is mainly a disease of old white men. The average age at the time of diagnosis is 73, and it's usually a white guy. Men are 4 times more likely to develop bladder cancer, but women are 4 times more likely to die from bladder cancer. Because early signs are often ignored, women have a higher chance of being told they have an advanced stage of bladder cancer than men. So they're diagnosed later with a worse prognosis. Bladder cancer symptoms may be the same as those of a bladder infection. If symptoms do not go away after you're taking your antibiotics, after you're finished, follow up with your doctor, find out whether or not bladder cancer might be present. In my case, it was. The next set of statistics that interests me is the survival rates. The 5-year survival rate of people with bladder cancer that has not spread beyond the inner layer of the bladder wall is 95%. About half of people are diagnosed with this stage. Now, at this point, I'm getting pissed. Half. Wonder Doc told me 70%. 70%. The article I found online said half. But anyway, if the tumor is invasive but has not yet spread outside the bladder, the 5-year survival rate is 69%. If the cancer extends through the bladder to the surrounding tissue or has spread to nearby lymph nodes or organs, the 5-year survival rate is 35%. That's Trump approval rating. You don't want to go there. If the cancer is spread to distant parts of the body, bone, brain, lung, 5-year survival rate's 5%. About 4% of people are diagnosed at that stage. Okay, I know that's a lot of crazy, difficult numbers, and I'm not a math person, but I stayed up all night reading this stuff anyway. I read blog posts and personal stories, and I look at charts and graphs and horror stories and blurry CAT scan images and YouTube, and I have no idea what I'm looking like, and I'm getting scared and panicky. And what if I don't live to see Molly graduate high school? What if all the times we joked about Molly being an orphan because Mike was so damn old, the irony is he's gonna outlive me? And my Molly, my poor baby doll, first she had to live through my mother's cancer, losing her grandmother that she loved very dearly and deeply. And now here she is 5 years later facing it with me. It's not fair. It's so not fair. It's so very double plus ungood not fair, as Trump would say, or something very unfair. So I had a CAT scan Thursday with a dye. And that rolls around, and I'm signing all kinds of hold harmless waivers in case I have a fatal allergic reaction to that contrast dye, which is not uncommon apparently. I find out at the last minute from the anesthesiologist. The doctor needs to get a good look at the vascular system of this neoplasm of unspecific behavior. Now, we've not shared the news with anybody except Chris and a couple of very close family friends, and no need to scare the world if there's nothing there, right? But I'm scared. Really. And I'm not looking forward to this endless, timeless, hourless stretch between test and test results. But the technician is another pretty, chatty young woman who runs me through a practice drill about holding my breath and lying perfectly still while she lined up laser beams on a grid on my abdomen. She offers me ear foamies to block the snapping noise. Then she injects the dye, which makes me feel hot and cold at the same time. And for just a split second, I think I'm going to vomit. But the heat rises in my throat, and then it sinks, and then it's over. The dye is in, and I didn't die. Time for the testing. The machine whirls around me for about 60 seconds as it shoves me in and out of this tube twice. Opened up like the space shuttle pod finally, and my pretty technician walks in, and she's still smiling, but she asks in a more serious tone, "So how did they find it?" And there it is. I wasn't going to have to wait for a cancer diagnosis. It was just confirmed. There was an it. She saw it. How did they find it? And then it got just a smidgen worse. "Did you see blood in your urine?" "Winner, winner, chicken dinner. It's cancer. Game over. Ding, 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 ding." Mike walked me to the car, and for the first time I cried. Well, it's more like I fell completely apart in the front seat. Hot, nasty, ugly crying. Tammy Faye Baker face crying, everything, just disgusting. I had a t-shirt once that had this smudged face imprint on it, like you'd pressed a heavily made up woman's face into the shirt and peeled it off like a sticker. And above it, the words were ironed on, "I ran into Tammy Faye at the mall." I love that shirt. I wore that roller skating at Sparkles, and everybody laughed. I dressed up as Tammy Faye for Halloween twice, but menopause brains jumping the tracks again. Sorry. Okay, so where am I? I'm in the front seat. I'm crying. Mike is holding me across the center console, stroking my hair over the gear shift, trying to comfort me. But his voice is shaking. His body's shaking. I don't think either of us have been that scared before. At least not since we thought for a few frightening, terrifying moments that he might have thyroid cancer back when we lived in Chicagoland in 2000 in the bad old WLS 890 AM days. Thank God it turned out to be a benign cyst, or goddess. But it was suspicious because it's the opposite of bladder cancer. Thyroid cancer is much more common in women, so if a man has a lump, it's usually bad news. Mike got lucky, dodged that bullet. So we got home and braced for the Molly talk. I didn't want to think about that at all, not for a second. What do I say? Hey, babe, come here a minute. Hey, gotta ask you a question. If I die of cancer and your dad dies of natural causes, let me ask you, do you want to stay here and live with your godfather Jack and Robin and stay at your high school? Or do you want to move in with your brother in South Carolina and go to a different school but live with your brother? Which sounds good to you? You know, I mean, it reminds me of a conversation Barbara Bush would have with Hurricane Katrina victims. Isn't this kind of like camp? Don't you like it here so much better than in the little hovels you were sleeping in? Isn't this fun? It's really a lot better off, you know. You really are. It's kind of what it was. I might as well have asked her if she'd rather have a failing grade in a math class or spend an afternoon in a room full of snakes. I mean, how do you have that conversation? So Mike and I decided, well, you don't have that conversation. Not until it's absolutely necessary. So we just kept all those crazy thoughts to ourselves and told Molly the bare minimum of what we knew. There's a mass, and Wonder Doc is going to take it out next Tuesday. TURBT procedure, transurethral resection of bladder tumor, and he thinks he's just going to get it all, and that'll be the end of the story, thank God, over with, full stop. That's what we tell her, and she says, okay. And she says, thanks for telling me, and seems to take it perfectly fine, and goes upstairs and does her homework. And the doc calls an hour later and confirms what we already knew from CAT scan lady. There's a tumor on the anterior wall near that right ureter opening, but it's not 3 centimeters, it's 7 centimeters. Okay. Bile is starting to rise again, starting to get a little dizzy. He emailed me a digital CAT scan photo. I see this fuzzy oval with an arrow, and I guess that was it. I'm getting more anxious. He jokes and says, okay, listen, try to have a good weekend. Don't think about it. Worry doesn't do anything to heal your mind, body, or spirit. Speaking of spirit, I suggest bourbon. Ha 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 ha. I like this guy. So does Mike. They met over coffee pods and bonded here over my CAT scan results. Well, our household mood fell into this kind of ambivalent limbo netherworld where we were happy and upbeat one minute and sad and near tears the next. It was an exhausting roller coaster, and honestly, it only lasted about a long week before we had the pathology report. That was head spinning and dizzy. First visit Tuesday, CAT scan Thursday, biopsy the next Tuesday, pathology report Friday. Damn. But I'm jumping ahead. First, we faced this 4-day weekend from CAT scan to TURBT, biopsy, which also was with the killer dye, but this time under general anesthetic. Still outpatient. I go in at 8 in the morning, go home by 2 p.m., nothing to it. He does them all day, every day. This and prostate surgery are his top 2 surgeries. He says he can do them blindfolded, but you won't. I ask, and he laughs. And he's just so friendly. And I like this guy with his cute socks. A long weekend ahead, and there's something special about it that I haven't told you. You got to understand. Long planned, before any of the cancer crazy, Molly and I are throwing her best friend a surprise 15th birthday party at our house that Saturday night with sleepover guests. Yes, Truth Seekers, cancer diagnosis on Thursday, huge surprise party with 20 screaming co-ed teenagers in sweaty midsummer hormonal glory decorating our yard and basement on Saturday. The theme is Stranger Things, the TV show. If you're not familiar with it, you live in a cave. So we're up in the Hellmouth attic digging up colored Christmas lights and Halloween fog machines and gauzy fabric and black lights and plaster of Paris and Mod Podge and reflective tape and spirit gum and liquid latex and cheesecloth and alcohol face paint and all that stuff you have in your attic, right? Or just me? Anyway, so here we are, all these giggly teenage girls over at my house. Mike's freaked out. I'm totally freaked out. And all I can say is, thank you, great spaghetti monsters, spirit in the sky. I think those girls saved my sanity that weekend. Maybe my life. I love my girls. I couldn't think about cancer. I was too busy blowing up balloons and stringing Christmas lights and turning the basement into the upside down and hiding fog machines and working extremely hard to make sure the birthday girl didn't discover our plans, which required us changing them a couple of times. Meanwhile, we did tell the 3 guy friends who we know who are living with this diagnosis, and we were just overwhelmed by their support. It was generous. It was instant. They sent me encouraging email, helpful websites, recipes, articles about research, treatment. They called me, checked on me. I have not felt that loved in that way in a long time. One of them is a guy I've never met, but I consider one of my best and closest friends. I hope everyone has a few of these people in their lives. We all need a cheerleader or 2 or 3 in our corner when the trade winds change and the seas get rough. Someone to guide the ship. Tuesday, August 6th, we wake up at 6 a.m. and I rinse my mouth but spit and don't swallow. I've shaved my upside down because the last time I had a procedure was my cardiac ablation, which was accessed through my femoral arteries. Right artery, left artery, right at your groin. So immediately before they knocked me out, and I still wonder why, to this day, they didn't gas me first and then shave me. It would have just avoided so much PTSD. Someone attacks my lady parts with a single blade razor. Bone dry. I tried to sit up and protest like you would if someone was doing that to you, and she shoved me back down, literally shoved me back down with one hand while she was still shaving me, and she said, "Be still or you're going to get cut." I swear to God, that's what she said. "Be still or you're going to get cut." I thought I had landed in some bad B movie about women in prison for a minute. I mean, she hacked me up like Sid and Nancy, that I woke up, I had scabs, I had road rash, but she does that, and then the bitch turned on the gas. After that, no thanks. I'll tidy up my bits all by myself, if you please. So I did. So I'm neat and bright as a pin when we arrive at 8 a.m. on the dot. We drop Molly off early, which she loves because it gives her extra time in the morning to hang out with her friends or finish her homework, so it's a win-win. So we walk in and they snap the little plastic ID bracelet on me, and it's got a barcode just like the apocalypse said. Got all my information on a chip or something that's probably transmitting God knows where. But they asked me for my name, my phone number about 10 times to make sure we're all on the same page, and when was the last time I ate or drank anything, and I asked if vodka counted, and she nodded very seriously, and I told her I was joking, and I was, and she asked me if I had any concerns before we went inside, and I said, well, let me give it a thought, but I'm worried that Trump was going to continue to lock children in cages and deport these poor immigrant families seeking political asylum because they're fleeing dangerous situations in South and Central American countries that are only dangerous because of American political practices during the Reagan-Bush-Iran-Contra Gulf War I debacle. And so you get that, right? Are you still taking your Wellbutrin and Cymbalta every day as prescribed, Ms. Mallory? Mrs. Mallory? I'm sorry, Mrs. They will probably misspell this on all our tombstones, or at least mine. People have probably heard Mike Malloy enough to get it right, but I don't know what psychological science fair school project this is, but for whatever reason, almost everyone I meet tries to put an R in our last name, Mallory. Why? It defies logic. It must be one of those New York Times brain teasers about how you see vowels and repeated consonants or double L's or something. So this is what's floating in my narcotized brain. The nice anesthesiologist gave me a little happy cocktail in my IV while I'm staring at Mike sitting in the chair across from me, and he's smiling back at me, but his legs are shaking and his hands are shaking. And he looks like he's freezing cold, but he's smiling, and he winks, and he makes a funny face, and he puts down his newspaper. And I have never felt more love for anybody in my life than I did for him at that moment. And the past didn't matter in that moment. Nothing mattered in that moment. It was as close to true mindfulness as I would understand it as I have ever felt. I felt so present in that room, and we were locked in that moment together, and we both knew it at the same time, and it didn't matter what pain had passed between us. It dissolved into the ether. I love you. I forgive you. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. The age difference was meaningless to me a long time ago, but it continued to trouble him to this day. So worried about leaving me and Molly before she was an adult. So devastated knowing he would likely not live to see the awesome, ass-kicking, humanist, protector, and citizen of the world we knew she would be, or her children, or her children's children. That's some heavy weight when you're already way past traditional retirement age. Here he was, cold and trembling. He didn't know where to look, put his hands, and he fucking hates hospitals, don't you know? Hates visiting, hates being a patient, hates being outside, inside, hates them with green eggs and ham. I don't like them, Sam, I am. Full of diseases and evil spirits, I guess. I don't know. But there he was, and there he stayed until it was time to take me home, semi-conscious, tethered to a catheter bag, about 2 o'clock that afternoon. Mike told me Wonder Doc said he got all the tumor, or is 99% sure he did. There were 2 other small satellite sites that he also cut out. My bladder looked good. It looked healthy. The tumor was like a football-shaped broccoli stalk, he explained. I would later see this in the photos. Egad, it's a sea monster after all. No wonder I kept thinking about seaweed. It looked like a piece of oval football-shaped coral floating peacefully in a yellow ocean. It was truly disturbing, in a kind of a, I don't know, alien sort of way. Well, the tumor didn't appear to be invasive, but he was slightly concerned because the stalk of the broccoli football was thicker and rubbery, and that was a little suspicious that it might be of a higher grade. But he didn't sugarcoat anything. You know, I like this guy with his clever socks. So he sent the whole thing to biopsy, and we would know by Thursday or Friday. 2 more nights to play the waiting game. When I came to that sofa, I knew that catheter was going to have to go. I had never been that physically uncomfortable in my life. I don't even remember the car ride home, But as soon as I sat down on that sofa, I felt like somebody had just stabbed me where you didn't want to be stabbed. I was groggy, but I stood straight up as an arrow and tried to reposition it, but it hurt even worse. Now, Wonder Doc had told me and told Mike in the notes that I could take this thing out myself. Easy, just cut all the tubes and then let it drain. As long as the urine was clear for 24 hours, no blood, no anything. Probably would be Friday. I didn't think I would live till Friday. I called his office immediately and said, listen, I need some lidocaine or Novocaine or cocaine or something to numb this area. Something. And they called it in, and Mike ran out to get it at Walgreens and picked Molly up from school, and I wiggled around like a monkey and tried to find a comfortable position, and I finally was able to get one leg up on a pillow on my side, and I think I fell asleep for about an hour, and I woke up when they came in, and I was all dopey and cotton-mouthed and kind of like now. And Mike brought me the lidocaine, thank you, and he helped me slowly go upstairs, holding onto the railing, and I'm not supposed to climb so many stairs, and damn, I'm not used to being this off my game, this dependent, this helpless. It's very super not good, as Trump would say. So upstairs, I use the lidocaine, and I start feeling better. I drink some water, and my head's clearing, and I start to think about this catheter problem, and I untape it from the two places on my calf and thigh and realize it's like it feels like about an extra foot of tubing that I didn't need, that's just waggling around and causing the problem, and it's making it push up inside too far. So how do I fix this, right? So what do? Well, call my friend Tina, the nurse. So I quickly catch her up to speed and explain my predicament. Jesus, you have cancer, Kathy? Jesus. Okay, Tina, yeah, I know. I was going to tell everybody once I had a firm diagnosis after biopsy. So sorry, BFF. Now, will you just please tell me how to fix this catheter so I don't yank it out? So she asked me to describe it and then asked me if I had any kind of similar tubing, any kind of clear plastic tubing. Now I'm thinking, okay, who has clear plastic tubing in their house? What is this? Somebody, Silence of the Lambs? I mean, what kind of freak has clear plastic tubing? I mean, not like having life-size posable zombies in your attic or anything like me. Now that's normal, but who has clear plastic tubing? And they go, you know who has clear plastic tubing? I have clear plastic tubing. Bingo, aquarium tubing. Yes, I do. Thank you, Girl Scouts. I have survival skills. I grab Molly's aquarium tubing. Yes, it's new. Yes, it's clean. And Tina walks me through this little operation on the phone. Pretty soon my catheter's in the right position, taped neatly with some Coban, won't pull my skin, and it's about 6 inches shorter. Mission accomplished. I finally fall asleep and sleep for the next 10 blissful hours. And how delightful not to have to get up and pee. Not once in 10 hours. Now, I wake up Wednesday with a headache and what feels like gas pains all over my body. I notice I have an extremely full bag, and it is the oddest feeling dragging a 5-pound bag of warm urine across your bedroom floor. May you never experience it. I have beige carpet, and this is bright orange and looks radioactive. I guess it was the killer dye. I imagined it was the stuff they dropped on Vietnam. As soon as I get to the bathroom, I start laughing, and it occurs to me, I am about to go boldly where few women have gone before. I am going to pee standing up. Yes, truth seekers, I'm holding the artificial plastic bladder in one hand and trying to lift the toilet lid with the other because that's what men do. And I almost drop the bag, but finally get the valve open, and I stand there holding it like a deflating bagpipe draining into the toilet. Neon orange Easter egg dye staining the porcelain on contact. I close my eyes and I listen to the sound of this gentle, steady splashing like a garden hose into a swimming pool. images of ancient Greek tragic heroes and their mother troubles, and the ladies who were dying from envy appear like wallpaper behind my eyelids. Am I tripping? What's in this dye anyway? Is this made in China? I managed to get this bag empty, and I flush it 4, 3, 10, 12 times. I don't know. I have to dump a bunch of bleach in the toilet because I have a note taped to the back of the toilet that says, put bleach in the toilet after you empty your catheter bag like the doctor said. Thank you, Mike. And so it neutralizes the chemicals. So that's like Mike's least favorite smell in the world is bleach. The only thing worse is ammonia or cat pee, which is really the same thing, and then a dead rat. So top 3 worst smells for Mike would be bleach, ammonia, dead rat. So this isn't going to be happy for anybody. But Mike, God love him, takes it like a champ. But we moved me into the basement anyway because there's a full bath and a shower down there over this new vinyl flooring that we had put in since the brown water experiment. Remember that? Doesn't that seem like a long time ago? Yeah, I know. Yeah, for me too, True Seekers. Yeah, for me too. About an hour and a half ago, I think. Gotta wrap this up sometime, right, True Seekers? It's getting near dawn, as the song says. So, last gross out moment of the evening, and I'm done, I promise. And you gotta admit, if you're listening to a story about bladder cancer, there's gonna be some pee-pee, right? Right. So after the first elimination, that's a nice word, the color returned to normal and never changed again. Not even a speck of blood or a thread of tissue. It was wheat-colored and transparent. So I took the catheter out Thursday morning. But I was grateful for that experience because in that moment I was convinced at that day, at that hour, I was going to end up with a radical cystectomy, losing my bladder, with a radical hysterectomy, ovaries, uterus, part of my vagina, and all my lymph nodes removed. I wanted to be prepared, I guess, for the worst possible news, and I also thought that was my best chance at living longer than my mother. You know, that was my only question. My mother lived to be 76. The last 8 months of her life were hell. She had tongue cancer. She had chemo and radiation that did not work and made her very sick. And she had blisters inside and outside her mouth. They had to pull all her teeth. She couldn't eat. She had a gastric tube. She only weighed 90 pounds. It was horrifying. And I knew that's not what I wanted. I couldn't live like that ever. And Mike didn't want that for me, and neither did Molly. No one did. So I asked the doctor, what's my best chance of living longer than my mother if it's the bad cancer? And he said, radical cystectomy. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. I like this guy. So I wasn't terrified, actually. I wanted to be prepared because I was a menopausal woman, and that made it more likely it was advanced or invasive or high grade and metastasized, and I might only have a 50% chance of living to see Molly graduate high school. I wasn't terrified. I was just terribly sad and overwhelmed with this realization of how trite and cliche but absolutely true it is that we spend way too much time on petty bullshit when time is the only thing we can't afford to throw away. Like voting Republican, it's against the best interest, but you do it anyway. Well, there's no reason to keep you in suspense any longer. As many of you know, I was lucky. I was one of the lucky ones, good ones. Positive news. Cancer was superficial, non-invasive, stage 1, low grade, about the best possible outcome anyone could hope for. I shot up some gratitude toward whatever energy was receiving and cried happy tears for the first time in a very long time. And it had been 2 weeks. How is that possible? Not 2 months? Not 2 years? It was 2 weeks from start to finish. It's like a time warp. Now, there was one final result. The pathology review by Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. the gold standard for bladder cancer research. My wonder doc studied there, and he knew all the staff. The local pathology report here from the big hospital said there was no muscle tissue present in the sample. And Wonder Doc says he is positive he sent them a healthy chunk of muscle tissue. So he wanted to confirm they didn't miss anything, leave no cancer cell unturned or something. And thankfully, once again, we dodged the bullet. A week later, results came back. Memorial Sloan Kettering did confirm there was muscle tissue, and indeed it was non-invasive superficial papillary carcinoma stage 1, about the best possible outcome. Hallelujah. Dodged another bullet. So now I've had one additional biopsy last week to remove a bit more around those 2 satellite sites, and my first of 6 mitomycin C intravescular, which means directly into the bladder, local chemo treatments, not my blood, into my bladder. I will have 5 more of these over the next several weeks. After my first treatment late last week, I became very nauseous and had dry heaves for hours. I was dizzy, I was lightheaded, and I had to be taken by ambulance early that next morning to the hospital again and spent the night. In retrospect, it looks like I was dehydrated, because as soon as I got IV fluids, all my numbers improved and I started feeling better. And maybe it was the contrast dye reacting to the chemo drug or the new antibiotic, and it doesn't matter. The unexpected return trip to the hospital last week is the reason that Bob Kincaid, thank gosh, once again came to the rescue like a white knight and host a couple of extra nights for us. And then I heard Molly man the controls and did really proud, and I'm so proud of my big girl, and she's driving cars and running the board and doesn't need me around anymore, and I should stop talking like that. So I want to thank everyone who has sent their bright healing energy toward the Atlanta headquarters here, toward the bunker in the foothills of the North Georgia mountains. We felt it all the way inside the bunker. Your bright healing light, you held us in that light. Your notes and your letters and your email warm wishes and your knickknacks, they've been treasured. They're not unnoticed. I hope to thank everyone. You are all treasured, and I apologize for being as far as behind I am on email. It's insane. I literally had 700 email when I finally got back in front of a computer earlier this week. And I know there were book order issues and sponsorships and donations and questions, and I'm working backwards through them all. I have a Girl Scout meeting tomorrow. I missed a major PTSA board meeting last week, and I lost a real estate contract. So, such is life. Militant mindfulness. Que sera, sera. Kind of like a Jedi Knight. The Force is in you. You have to force yourself. Force yourself to stop or slow down, even if you have to be slammed to the ground by a psychic ninja warrior or a cancer diagnosis to get the message. And that's my message to you tonight in this bonus show is, if you take nothing else away, think about some mindfulness, militant or not. Maybe you don't have to be body slammed like I did. And also, get checked. If you see blood in your urine, I don't care if you're 2, 12, 20, 200, girl, boy, both, doesn't matter. Get it checked. Don't be afraid to get it checked. I wasn't afraid. I just kept kind of stupidly plodding along like a lemming, believing that all these medical providers were completely correct. One after another, 3 different ones. Until I finally found a urologist who said, no, that's not normal, but we're going to fix it. And he did. I'm sorry that the bonus show you were expecting Sunday, you probably will not be getting until sometime on the 17th. Blame it on the full moon. It's my fault. I have a lot of catching up to do. Fundraising email and drama club props and boring things like that I treasure now more than I ever have in my life. So be well, keep it lit, take care, tell someone I love you today.